Small home items like mirrors, lamps, art, and other decor pieces are a really great way to start your vintage journey. These pieces are low commitment and a great way to find your own vintage personal style. Today I'm going to give you a few tips on how to find quality lamps, quality arts and mirrors, and other home accents. I think that vintage accessories look best in a modern home. They act as a foil for other decor pieces, and they add just layers of interest and layers of complexity to your design. Let's get started with lamps. I actually think that lighting is very underemphasized in a lot of design. We think that we have overhead lights and that's all we need, but lighting is really important to set the mood and to set the overall feeling of beauty in your home. So yeah, lamps are super important. The first thing we're gonna do is talk about the different parts of a lamp. This one is obviously missing a shade, and that's okay. This top part right here that every lamp needs that has a shade is called a finial, just like that. Sometimes they're missing if you find them at a store. This part right here is the harp, and they can come in a wide variety of sizes to match the shade. These are also sometimes missing at thrift stores. And then this is the base of the lamp, and here is the cord, which can tell you a lot about the quality and age of a lamp. If I saw this lamp at a store, the first thing I would do to inspect it and assess its quality is to pick it up, and it's heavy, which is always a good thing, and look for any sort of signature or maker's mark. On this one, it looks like it's been painted over before, but down here I can see a carving in the back, the base, right by the cord, that tells me 1961 and the company or person who made this lamp. So that's a good sign. Another dead giveaway is the cord. If you look closely at the cord, most people can probably tell that this is not a brand new cord, but this is an old cord. It has this really thin wire as opposed to new cords, which are usually much thicker. And if you look at the prongs, this part is much smaller than modern cords. And each of these prongs here that go into the outlet are exactly the same size. But in modern prongs for modern lamps, one is always bigger than the other in order to fit into the modern outlets. So we know that this is a vintage lamp just by looking at the cord. One last thing with this lamp is when I took the finial off, I could tell that it's solid brass and it's really heavy. And because the finial is good quality, that gives me a clue that the lamp is of good quality too. And that's true for almost every lamp. Okay, the other clue to whether a lamp is a very good quality lamp is the material it's made out of. And I actually have a better example for that. So let's switch the lamps out. And they're so pretty. Okay, now, if you saw these at a thrift store, you would probably buy them just because they're so gorgeous and you wouldn't care if they're good quality or not. But if I saw them, I would want to inspect whether they're good quality. Now, when I lifted them up, they were super heavy. So like always, that tells me that they're made of a good, solid material. And if you look really closely, you'll see that the metal on these lamps has a lot of patina. And by that, I mean it has wear marks where you can tell that the brass has aged over time. And in the case of a solid material like brass, patina and age just makes it that much more beautiful. These do not have a harp and they don't have a finial, but I don't want you to be intimidated if you find a lamp like this. A harp can be bought at any hardware store for around $5. And you can find finials as well. You can get ones that are very expensive, you can get one that are not, but they're really easy to replace. Again, when we look at the cord here, they're old. There's no signature on these, but I know that they are of high quality and beautiful materials, so I would always buy something like these if I found them at a thrift store. To help you train your eye a little bit more, I'm gonna show you an example of a material that's not as high quality as this material so you can see the difference. This is a newer lamp, and maybe in a picture they would look really similar in material, but if you touch it and you feel it and you look closer, you'll see that this one is super light, this is super heavy, This one, although it looks like the same color and has shine just like this one does, it has absolutely no patina. And if you look very closely, you'll be able to tell that it's actually just some aluminum or a cheaper metal that has been painted gold. I can even see the brush marks because it wasn't a very good paint job on the lamp. It's all about just training your eye to see the little details, even though in a picture, they might look really similar in material. Let's take a closer look at this cord. A lot of people are nervous about buying vintage or antique lamps because they think that it's dangerous, that the wiring is dangerous. This lamp in particular has a modern enough cord that it's not going to be dangerous. But in antique lamps, this middle part is often not there. There's just exposed wires inside the plug. And a lot of times you'll find frayed wires, which is also a bad thing. But if you find a lamp that's really good quality, I don't want you to be intimidated just by the wiring because it's actually pretty inexpensive to have a lamp like this rewired. So the most important factor when you're deciding whether to buy a thrifted or vintage lamp is whether you like it or not. But the point of my demonstration is to show you that there are some really good high quality lamps out there that you can thrift or find in a vintage market for a great deal. And I want you to be careful not to spend too much money at a thrift store for a lamp like this, which isn't worth very much money at all. Okay, lamps aren't the only way to brighten up a room. Mirrors are a great way to add light to your room. It's almost like putting a window on your wall. I love finding vintage and antique mirrors, but like lamps, there's a wide range of quality when it comes to mirrors, either thrifted or new. This is called a Federal style mirror. It's a actually pretty popular type of antique or vintage mirror. They usually have an eagle on the top and some sort of decoration on the bottom. I can tell that this is a good quality mirror for a few reasons. First, I know it's quality because it's heavy. Like usual, that's always a great tip to know whether it's made out of solid wood. What is a lesser quality mirror is something that's made out of resin, which is not solid wood, but can look like wood without closer inspection. On this mirror, there is some chipping of the paint, especially on these little balls. And if you look closely, you can tell that these parts of the mirror are actually real wooden balls. So again, if a mirror's parts are made with genuine materials, then you know that it's a higher quality mirror than something that's made with resin or plastic. I can tell that this mirror is old, not just because it's a little rough around the edges, but because of the glass in the mirror itself. For a long time, mirrors were made with a combination of glass and mercury, and it was made that way until about the mid-1800s. So if you ever find a mirror that has a glass like this, where you can see spots of black, you know that it's a mirror that was made with mercury. Since I can see that this glass is made with mercury, then I know the approximate age of the mirror is before the 1850s, which tells me that it's made out of solid materials. It was handmade, it was made before the Industrial Revolution, and that means that it has higher value and higher quality. Whenever I see mercury glass, I buy it. Okay, let's take a look at a similar mirror so you can see the differences. This is also a Federal style mirror. You can tell just by looking that it's the same general shape with the eagle on the top and the decoration on the bottom and the balls around it. When I lifted this up, I could tell right away that it wasn't of the same quality because it was much lighter. If you lift something up that's lighter, the first thing I would do is turn around and look at the back. On this mirror, let's see. I don't see any labels, but down here, carved into the base, says made in the USA, copyright, with the name of the manufacturer. Now, that tells me that this is a reproduction. If you look at the backing and you feel how lightweight it is, you can tell that it's resin, and resin is something that is a plastic. So even though from the front it looks very similar to this one, as soon as you turn around to the back, you can tell that it's actually a reproduction and not the same thing. I still think that a mirror like this is very beautiful. I love these type of mirrors, but if you find something like the old mirror at a thrift store, you know you found real treasure of real value, and it's something that's rare that you haven't seen before. These are mass manufactured, so you can buy them in a lot of places. And I want you to be careful not to overspend for these at a thrift store because sometimes they're marked at really high prices when they really don't have that high of value. I'm a painter, and I think that the most important part of a home is art on the walls. I would rather have no furniture and just art on the walls than a room with furniture and no art. Art is what makes a room feel beautiful. Rugs can be beautiful, plants can be beautiful, but art is what makes a room feel beautiful. And when people visit your house, they might not remember the things in your house, but they will remember how the room made them feel. Original art is always better than a print, in my opinion, but original art can be really expensive. A great way to get beautiful original art is to find it in a thrift store or a flea market. I'm gonna show you how to tell whether it's a print or whether it's original work of art, because sometimes it can be tricky. First, I'm going to bring out one of my favorite paintings. On first glance, if you were just looking at a picture, you couldn't tell whether this was a print or a painting, but I know that it's an original painting based on a few clues. One, take your hand and move it across the canvas to see if you feel any bumps. I definitely feel texture here, which gives me a clue that it's an original painting. But sometimes you can be fooled. There are some prints that print texture on a canvas to make it look like it's really a painting when it's not. So that can't be the only clue. You got to keep digging. Another really easy way to tell whether it's an original work of art is to look at the sides. If it's in a frame, take it out of the frame and turn it like this. And you'll see that this canvas is painted all the way to the sides of the frame. That means that this wonderful artist painted her painting on a canvas, and then she fit the painting to the frame instead of the other way around. If this were a print, the sides of this canvas would be white and it would be a clean square because a printer painted it, not a person. This painting is relatively new, but like other vintage pieces, paintings can have patina too. So I'm gonna show you what that looks like now. This is one of my favorite antique paintings that I have. If you look closely, the colors of this painting are very bright and vivid, which tells me that it was painted with oil paints. But it has a sort of muted haze over it, which tells me that it's been around for a long time. And that haze just looks like an old painting, something you'd see in an old castle or in an old mansion or maybe in a haunted TV show. And what tells me that this is probably older than vintage is something called craquelure. And if you look closely, it's right there. It kind of looks like the desert floor. There's just little cracks in the paint like this. If you had a very expensive piece of artwork, you would take it to someone who repairs art to fix it. But if it's not a precious piece of art like this one is, I think that it adds beautiful character to anything on your wall. And that's the best kind of art, something that inspires wonder of everybody who sees it. Okay, so I've shown you an authentic painting. I've shown you an example of an antique painting. Let's move on to an example that will show you how prints can sometimes be really misleading. This is a really beautiful print of a painting by one of my favorite artists, Mel Remmers. And it's unique in that at first glance and maybe even second glance, it looks like it's an original painting. But if you train your eye and you know what to look for, you'll be able to tell that this is actually a print. The first thing, like before, is we run our fingers across the canvas and see if we can feel texture. On this particular painting, I can feel texture, especially around these eyelashes and down here. And that's because there has been some texture added to those parts of the print, which makes it look more like a real painting. It's genius. Another way is what we did before. We can look at the sides and see if there's uniformity in the back of the canvas. So remember on the original painting, you could tell that someone had hand painted a canvas and then stretched it over a frame. In this case, we can see, even without these letters on it, we can see that the line of where the painting ends is very straight and uniform, which tells me that it was printed on a printer. Now, in the absence of these markers, there's another way that you can tell whether something is a print or not. And this is especially helpful when you're at a thrift store or a flea market and it's behind glass, or you can't access the back, or you can't feel the canvas. You just get a magnifying glass. Now think about how a painting is printed. It's printed with a printer, and there's primary colors, and then there's a formula that mixes it into a color. That pixelation we'll be able to see when we look underneath a magnifying glass. So once I look really closely at the different colors, and it's easier to see on the brighter colors, I can tell that there are uniform pixelations in each of the tones. I can tell that there's no texture on some of the lighter colors. And it's almost like seeing little dots that you can't see from far away, but when you look close, you see tiny little dots. So this print is one of my favorite things that I have in my house, and I love it very much. So just because something's a print doesn't mean that you shouldn't buy it. But if you're at a thrift store and there's something that you love and it's kind of a lot of money and you're wondering whether to bring it home, I wouldn't spend a lot of money on prints, because especially with vintage prints, you can get them printed for a very cheap price on your own. You don't need to go and buy a worse quality printing that they did in 1970. You could just have that same print printed again. So prints in of themselves are not a bad thing. But if you're looking for original art, this is a way to find out whether what you love is original or print. Like art, vintage and antique decor pieces are those little things in your home that when you have them, make your room feel beautiful. I'm gonna tell you some of my favorite finds. When I find them in a thrift store for a good deal, I always buy them. The first thing, no matter where I'm shopping, is if I see a piece of marble, like a marble tabletop that's missing a base and it's a good price, I always buy them because I can always find a really good use for them. I'll show you what I mean. This one right here, I see these all the time for sale. Sometimes they're huge ones that are like $20, or one like this. There's a lot of countertop fabricators, and when they cut sink cutouts, when they're installing countertops, they sell circles like these, which is the shape of the sink, and they sell them for like $5 a piece. You can get these all the time. And when I find beautiful ones, I always put them in my garage because I know that I'm going to be able to use it later. One thing you can do is put it on a Lazy Susan like this, and they're super fun for in the middle of big round tables for passing things around, or putting on kitchen countertops that you can't put hot things on. It's really good to put them on these too. Another thing I like to do is put them on top of a pedestal or something that's a little taller. And when you put it on top like this, it makes an instant marble side table. And if you go into a store and buy a brand new marble side table, it's gonna cost a lot of money. But if you can find scrap marble and get creative with the base, you can have something that's way better and way more interesting for a fraction of the cost. Next, I'm gonna show you something that I always buy when I see them at a thrift store, and that's small, interesting vessels or bowls. There's lots of different kinds of vessels that you'll find at a thrift store. Imagine those long aisles of home goods that you see. And it can be overwhelming, but if you know what to look for, you can spot the best vessels with a trained eye. Something like this, I buy all the time. I actually collect these. They're like old tins. This one's probably about maybe 30 years old. Also, something like this is really special. It's an old terracotta vessel. Sometimes you'll find something like these. If you look closely at it, you'll notice that it's very imperfect, like somebody's thumbs made the sides of this. And that's what I always look for, something that's imperfect, which tells me that it was handmade by a human. It was handmade with love, and that makes it so much more special. This one doesn't have a signature on it, but with clay and terracotta, a lot of times I'll find somebody's name on the bottom. And I always have to buy those because I feel so sad that somebody's creation was left at a thrift store and I don't know why. So I adopt it and bring it home. And I do something like this with it. I especially like to use them when I'm going over to somebody's house for a hostess gift. All you have to do is pull some wildflowers from your house or put a plant in it. It's something that's handmade and that they'll always remember came from you. If you find a bowl, it could be a glass bowl or a clay bowl or a vessel like this. All you have to do is drill a hole in the bottom too, and it can be a really good planter. And you'll often be able to buy an old hand-painted vessel at a thrift store for cheaper than you could buy a plastic potting pot at a garden store. So that's why I like to buy those whenever I see a special item. Next, one thing that I always keep my eye out for is something like this, an antique or a vintage bowl that has a little bit of patina. And this is the easiest DIY craft. If you know how to drill a hole, you can do this and make a sconce out of an old wooden bowl. I see these all the time in stores and they're usually dollars. They're very cheap and you can put it on the wall and make a super unique sculpture. And when the light is on, it shows all those special textures and patina. Or if you get a different type of light kit, you can always hang it from the ceiling like a pendant. And as you know, lighting can be really expensive. So finding creative ways to create lighting not only makes it more interesting in your home, but it also saves a lot of money. From lamps to mirrors to art to decoration, I hope that this chapter has helped you to train your eye to sift through the piles of mass-produced junk and find those little treasures that will really transform your house into a beautiful home.